everyone, Thunder Thrills here, and I am back with content hopefully for a decent period of time. Starting off with this new wave of videos, I'm going to rank my RMCs. I've ridden 12 RMCs, which technically I've ridden 14, but I don't really count Railblazer and Joker since my Northern California trip was during the worst period of my life, so I don't really know how to properly rank them. But starting off this list, and my lowest ranked RMC overall is... Twisted Cyclone. I used to be the #1 defender of this ride between mid-2021 and mid-2023, but when I revisited Six Flags Over Georgia in July of 2023, it wasn't nearly as good as I had remembered. I still heavily enjoy this ride, and I would take it over the vast majority of coasters I've ridden, but as far as RMCs go, this is the weakest one in my eyes. Some of the standout moments include the first drop, the step down, and the reverse cobra roll. Back in 2021, I would have also included the wave turn in this, but honestly, after my revisit, I think it's on the weaker side of RMC wave turns. With the exception of the first drop, which I think is legitimately one of the better RMC first drops, the other best elements don't hold a candle to the other, better standout elements on RMC's better coasters. The length of this ride is also a major problem. The ride feels over before it starts, and I feel like a third lap would have really helped it to feel more complete. This ride is still a very high 8 out of 10 to me, it just lacks what other RMCs higher on this list have in comparison. Twisted Cyclone is like that album that you had on repeat years ago. It still slaps in parts, but revisiting it now, you realize it doesn't hit quite as hard as you remembered. Whether that has to do with my taste in coasters changing, or experiencing more and more roller coasters if this one just doesn't hit in comparison, I don't really know. Next up on this list is New Texas Giant. I consider this ride the absolute highest of the 8 out of 10 coasters on my list. My ranking spreadsheet is divided into tiers, and this is at the very border between the A and S category. If this ride had real standout moments on level with the higher ranked RMCs, it would place a lot higher on this list. But what this ride does have is an abundance of really enjoyable ejector airtime and some fun turns and curves along its course. I think this ride gets the respect it deserves. It is far from RMC's best creation, but for a first roller coaster in a prototype model, this knocked it out of the park for what RMC's potential is. However, there's second and third roller coasters which are major upgrades from this, and you'll find them much higher on this list. This ride has two really notable moments for me, which is the first drop, which when this opened was probably one of the best in the world, and the airtime hill before the mid-course. This is by far the strongest moment of airtime on the ride, and is the only moment on the coaster I would say holds a candle to some of the RMCs higher on this list. The last thing that prevents this ride from scoring higher is the second half. While a good amount of the hills in the second half have really enjoyable airtime, there are a few dud ones. Especially one that I'm sure if you've ridden this ride, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Overall, New Texas Giant is an amazing ride. I just think it lacks a lot of the bite and power that a lot of the higher RMCs on this list have. Reaching the top 10, we have Wonder Woman Flight of Courage at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Every RMC from this point onward is at least a 9 out of 10 roller coaster, and all of them make it into my top 30. However, this one is definitely weaker than the ones above it, while being a good step up from the last two on this list. Where this ride suffers for me is the extremely jarring potholes in places, and that the shoulder straps detract from the overall experience, which is also a problem with the Rattler much higher on this list. This is one of the RMCs I would say overall gives a better experience in the front car, since it is a lot smoother in the front and still has excellent forces. Some of my favorite elements on this ride include the first dive loop, the twisted hills, and the last stingle dive. If this ride didn't have the dud elements such as the inversions and didn't have the jarring potholes, I could very well see this placing a few spots higher on this list. But as it stands, this is an amazing roller coaster with a couple of problems. One complaint I commonly see with this ride is that it lacks the power or strength, which I completely disagree with. This ride's elements packed quite a big punch for me, and I really thought this was a ride with a lot of good potential. I would have loved to get more rides on this, but unfortunately the line was long, so I didn't end up getting that many over my 2 days at Magic Mountain. Coming in at number 9 was my first RMC, Goliath at Six Flags Great America. The first time I rode this was in 2017, and it was instantly my #1 roller coaster, and I was completely blown away by what roller coasters could achieve. I haven't ridden this roller coaster since 2021, so my memory on it is a little foggy. This ride lacks length, similar to Twisted Cyclone, but what makes it better in my opinion is that it is far more aggressive. Every element on this ride up to the stall hits, and that's part of why it's ranked higher than those below it. Despite not having a lot of elements, what it does have are some of RMC's very best inversions and airtime. The first drop and speed hill are incredible airtime moments, and the two inversions are among RMC's best. The stall in particular is still my favorite stall on an RMC coaster for the hang time it provides. If this roller coaster was longer and didn't die out after the stall and had more elements along the lines of the first 5, I could easily see this making the top 5. But as it stands, it's a considerable upgrade from Wonder Woman and an awesome time. Goliath reminds me of a concert that opens with 2 absolute bangers, but then just kind of ends. You're hyped at first, but then you're wondering where the rest of it went. Now, you might not agree, but the next coaster on this list is Lightning Rod at Dollywood. I did, in fact, ride this with the launch in April of 2023, and I was not impressed. I still enjoyed it immensely, obviously, but when I was hyping this up in my head as the best roller coaster I had ever ridden, and it ended up just being a pretty standard RMC at the end of the day, I didn't even find it to be the best roller coaster at its own park. I much preferred Thunderhead, but still, this is a very solid second place in that park. The main problem with this ride is the fact that you could very obviously tell its elements were designed for much faster speeds than it was going when I rode it. The airtime is pretty standard for an RMC, and while that's fun, it's sort of all this ride has. This ride is basically a bunch of enjoyable but not very special twisted airtime moments. However, the reason this ride is higher than those below it is because of that launch. People said this ride had a weak launch, but my goodness, it was legitimately one of the punchiest launches I had ever experienced in my life. It was easily my favorite part of the ride, and is among RMC's best moments in my opinion. I was not expecting it to be as strong as it was. With that gone nowadays, I can absolutely not see this ride above Goliath. But until I get a re-ride, it will stay one spot above it. Racing on in at number 7, and barely out of my top half of RMCs, is Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This ride by a mile was the hardest to place on this list, because I have no idea how to properly rank it. If this ride was just either side on its own, I would put it below Wonder Woman, but the fact that it has 2 laps elevates it quite a bit. Twisted Colossus basically feels like 2 lower tier RMCs thrown together into one ride, and because of that, I think it deserves to be on the top of the lower half. The length of both halves combined is satisfying, and most of the elements hit, including one of the best inversions on an RMC, the top 0G roll on the blue side. I was absolutely not expecting the 0G roll to be as good as it was. It ended up being one of the most whippy RMC inversions I had ever experienced, and was the standout moment on the ride for me. This ride also has the most powerful individual airtime moments of my lower half of RMCs. I think this ride is a good step up from Lightning Rod, being 4 spots higher on my overall ranking, but despite being an amazing ride, this still lands on my lower half of RMCs due to its fair share of weak elements, and the fact that the stuff above it is just better in my eyes. I know a lot of people see this as a top tier RMC, but for me, it's dead in the middle of my RMC ranking and the top of my middle tier. Moving along, we find Stormchaser at Kentucky Kingdom. I am not calling it Wind Chaser. That name is stupid and doesn't make any sense at all. If there is a single word I could use to describe this ride, it is powerful. In terms of raw power, this is easily the top coaster on this list and has the strongest individual moment. However, what prevents me from putting this any higher is the multitude of dead elements during the ride, and the pacing being not nearly as good as other RMC coasters. This coaster has the worst layout flow of any RMC on this list, despite having some of RMC's best on it, and for me, that vastly brings down the overall experience of the ride. The standout moments on this ride are any airtime moment. This ride has the most powerful individual moments of airtime on an RMC by a landslide, with the strongest being the first hill on the Trick Track Double Up. However, basically any element that isn't airtime, like the inversions or overbanks, don't do anything for me, with the exception of the ending turn, which has some killer laterals. Stormchaser feels more like a mixtape of banger tracks than a full album. It's got some absolute hits, but they don't quite flow together like a top tier music album should. The next ride surprised me, and it's Wonder Woman Golden Lasso Coaster at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. What I enjoyed about this ride the most was its insane pacing and layout flow. This is probably the most aggressive RMC outside of my top 2 that I've ridden. This ride is relentless from start to finish, and despite its short length, packs one of the largest punches of any RMC coaster. I wasn't super big on this ride to start, but when I rode it later in the day, it shot up to almost being in my top 10 overall coasters and my 3rd favorite coaster in Texas. Once it warmed up, this thing went crazy. Every element hit harder, and the pacing somehow got even snappier, and the airtime went from decently good to powerful ejector airtime. The transitions are wicked fast, and whip you around like this ride is actively trying to throw you out of your seat. And honestly, I respect that. It feels like RMC just took every second of track and asked, how can we make this hurt in the best possible way? And the fact that it's a single rail only adds to that out of control feeling. It may not be the longest ride in the world, but it doesn't waste a single second. And by the time you hit the brake run, you're left wondering what happened in the best way possible. Speaking of roller coasters in Texas, at number 4 is Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas.
I was seriously expecting this to be a low-end RMC if I'm being completely honest with you guys. The layout never looked impressive to me outside of its iconic standout elements. However, this ride's quarry section absolutely does not deserve the hate it gets. Despite not being the fastest speed-wise, it packs an absolutely massive punch of power, and unlike Stormchaser, is only one section of the ride. The rest is well-paced and has some of the best sense of speed of any RMC. Standout elements include the first drop, zero G-roll, quarry dive, and brake run transition. Back to the music analogies that I used on some of the other coasters, Rattler feels more like a great album with one or two weird tracks in the middle. It's mostly great with a strong sense of identity, but the quarry crawl section kind of kills the vibe for a bit before it picks back up. Rattler is an incredible roller coaster that absolutely surpassed any expectations I had for it, and is a large reason this park is so incredible. From an objective standpoint, I think this is the best Six Flags park. However, it is still not my favorite. I'll go more into detail on my eventual park rankings video. But with that being said, we still have 3 more coasters on this list to get into. Reaching the top 3, we have Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City. This coaster became my number 1 when I rewrote it in June of 2023, and is in my opinion the only RMC without any weak elements. This ride is perfect from start to finish and has one of the best layouts of any roller coaster ever. The wooden feel really elevates it for me, as I love a good rough wooden coaster. For the second RMC to open, Outlaw Run is such an extreme upgrade from New Texas Giant and manages to still be in my top 3 of their roller coasters. While I don't think Outlaw Run has some of the ultra elite elements other RMCs do, everything on it is at the very minimum amazing and has some of the best flow of any roller coaster. If you have any enjoyment for very out of control rides, Outlaw Run would probably be up your alley. However, with the recent cutting down of the ride's trees, I can't see this ride staying as high as it is. The setting is another thing that made this ride so extremely special to me, and without it, I can't imagine this ride having the same magic anymore. However, as of June 2023, Outlaw Run is still in my very top tier of RMC roller coasters still. Outlaw Run is like a perfectly crafted meal. Every dish hits, there's no filler, and each course flows seamlessly into the next. It may not have the single most mind-blowing bite you've ever had, but the consistency and intensity from start to finish make it unforgettable. But now that the trees are gone, it's like eating that same meal in a bland dining room instead of a cozy, candlelit setting. It's probably still amazing, but some of that magic just isn't going to be there anymore, unfortunately. The runner-up on this list is Air Force One. When I first rode this in July of 2023, I wasn't as impressed as I thought I would be, but when I went back in February of this year, it was a lot better than I had remembered. This ride is ferocious from beginning to end. Every element on this ride just gets progressively more aggressive as it goes along, where it all climaxes in that insane finale of 6 back-to-back airtime moments. This ride really kicks it into high gear after the stall. Once you hit the outer bank, it goes all out to try and rip you in half. This ride's combination of aggression and pacing is unmatched by any other RMC roller coaster, and while it may not have the laterals that the top coaster on this list has, the overall package on this ride is so incredible and unhinged that it definitely deserves the second place spot on this list. My personal favorite element on this ride is the outer bank. The laterals combined with the aggressive ejector airtime is among my favorite sensations on any roller coaster. While I wouldn't call the outer bank the most aggressive moment on the ride overall, it's still my favorite for how sustained the ejector airtime combined with the laterals are. To cap this coaster off with one more analogy, Air Force One is like an EDM set that builds with tension and energy before dropping into a completely unhinged finale sequence that blows the roof off. The first half gets you moving, but once it finishes that stall, it's like the DJ slams the button and the outer bank hits like a surprise bass drop that sends the whole crowd into chaos. From there, it doesn't let up. The pacing escalates like stacked drops in a festival set. Each airtime moment and inversions, except maybe that final 0G roll, slaps harder than the last. It may not have the technical layering of the top coaster on this list, but the overall package is so wild, so aggressive, and flows so perfectly that it feels like a headline set at peak hour. But there's still one more coaster on this list that I think is better than this, so let's get into that. And finally, the number 1 roller coaster on this list is Wildcat's Revenge at Hershey Park. RMC tops out on my overall ranking at number 3, and this ride is one hell of a way to finish this list. I had a very hard time deciding between this and Air Force One for the number 1 spot, but remembering the moment I first got off this thing, I knew it was the best RMC I had ridden up to that point. It is the only RMC roller coaster to consistently have amazing laterals combined with airtime. Rattler may have some laterals, but Wildcat is the best RMC for them by a country mile. This ride is vicious and throws you around like no other RMC I've ridden. The top 3 on this list are all very close, but Wildcat does possibly have my favorite singular sequence on any of these roller coasters. The wave turn, twisted double down, and zero G-roll is quite possibly my favorite sequence on any RMC roller coaster, as it combines laterals, airtime, and whip into one crazy element. The rest of this ride is no sleeper either. From the massive camelback to the last two hills, this ride just keeps going, and the airtime gets progressively more powerful as it goes along. Remember how I mentioned Stormchaser had extremely strong elements but didn't have the pacing to make it all flow well? This ride's elements are very close to Stormchaser's in strength, and also combines with incredible pacing to boot. Wildcat's Revenge is like a relentless rock album that kicks down the door with its opening track and never lets up. It's loud, aggressive, and unapologetically wild, but it's not just noise. The laterals and airtime are like perfectly layered guitar riffs and drum fills. Each element brings the house down, combining technical skill with raw energy. While Stormchaser might have individual tracks that slap, Wildcat's Revenge delivers a full album experience with no drop in intensity and pacing that delivers it all home. I'm now about to bring my friend Theme Park Avenue to talk about this coaster now for a little bit. Take it away, Eric!
Hello everyone. If you've visited my channel before, you may already know that I think Wildcat's Revenge is simply one of the best roller coasters I've ever ridden. I do personally prefer Steel Vengeance and Iron Gwazi, but Wildcat's Revenge has strengths that even those two coasters come up short in. While those rides and some other RMCs have really strong starts, with standout elements, they don't capture as much thrill in the second half. Wildcat's Revenge is the rare RMC that I think gets better as the ride goes on. I love the first half too, with the first drop and the step-up underflip outclassing several RMC openings. But for me, this coaster becomes a different animal once you hit the wave turn. That moment is one of the absolute most violent and terrifying airtime pops I've ever experienced, especially on my back row ride, where the lap bar was not going down especially far. After that moment, the ride feels twice as fast, whipping through airtime hills, turns, and inversions with a pace that not even Steel Vengeance can match. Once you hit the brake run, you still have plenty of speed, but not so much that the ride feels like it should have been longer, which is a valid complaint I've seen many make about Iron Gwazi. Overall, Wildcat's Revenge might be the best paced RMC. It feels more unhinged than most coasters, and certain moments might be the craziest adrenaline rushes I've ever had. I have no complaints about this ride, and it's a worthy number 1 on any RMC list.
I hope you all enjoyed this ranking of my RMC roller coasters. RMC is a truly fantastic manufacturer that makes some incredible and wild roller coasters. Hopefully after this video I make several more, and I don't just want to disappear again, because I actually want to make coaster YouTube videos again. With that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and please subscribe everybody!